Picture this: a vast golden savanna stretching endless under a bruising purple sky, the kind that whispers of storms yet to come. In the heart of Kruger National Park, where the wild still sings its ancient song, a lone lion wandered. Once a king, now a shadow. His story, well, it's one of those that grabs you by the heart and doesn't let go. You ever wonder what happens when nature's mightiest fall? When survival hangs by a thread, and hope feels like a distant star. This isn't just about a lion. It's about compassion, transformation, and those miracles that sneak up when you least expect. Stick with me, because what happened to this old abandoned soul will leave you speechless. Let's step into the jungle together. The lion's paws dragged through the dust, each step a quiet ache echoing across Kruger's endless plains. Once his roar had silenced the night, a thunderclap that sent hyenas scattering. Now his ribs jutted sharp beneath matted fur, and his golden eyes, cloudy with age, searched for something. Maybe food, maybe home. The pride he'd led for years had turned their backs, as nature often does when strength fades. The air hung heavy with the scent of dry grass and distant rain. But for him, it was the weight of loneliness that stung deepest. Who hasn't felt, cast aside, like the world moved on without you? His breath rasped, a faint whistle in the twilight as he stumbled near a dried-up riverbed. The vultures circled high, their wings slicing the sky like dark omens, patient for the end. He was too weak to hunt, too old to fight off the hunger gnawing his bones. Yet in his slow shuffle there was a flicker of defiance, a spark that refused to die. It's funny how even in the worst moments, something inside just keeps going. Isn't it? The lion collapsed under an acacia tree, its thorns framing him like a broken crown. Night fell, and the savanna came alive with sounds. Crickets humming, a jackal's yip cutting through the dark. But the lion lay still, his warmth seeping into the earth. You'd think this was the end, that nature would close the book right there. But sometimes the universe has other plans. Far off, a radio crackled to life, carrying whispers of a dying king. Someone was listening. Someone cared. The stars blinked above, cold and unyielding as if weighing his fate. He lifted his head just barely, nose twitching at a faint whiff of something new. Hope, maybe. It's hard to say what animals feel, but don't we all sense when a shift is coming? His story wasn't over. Not yet. And out there, beyond the horizon, help was already stirring. What would it take to reach a soul so far gone? That's where this tale starts to twist in ways you'd never expect. The savanna woke with a blush of dawn, painting the horizon in soft pinks that felt like a promise. Far from the lion's thorny refuge, a battered jeep rattled along a dirt track, kicking up clouds of red earth that clung to the air like a memory. Themba, a ranger with hands calloused from years of coaxing life back to the wild, gripped the wheel, his brow furrowed. Beside him, Shio clutched a medical kit, her eyes scanning the endless grasslands. They'd heard the call last night, a Isoi's frail lion abandoned, dying alone. You know that feeling when your gut says you've got to do something no matter how tough? The radio hissed with static, spitting out coordinates that led them deeper into Kruger's heart. The air was sharp with the tang of dew-soaked leaves, different from the dry dust of the lion's world. Themba's voice broke the quiet, low and steady, as he recounted stories of other rescues, each one a small miracle. CCO nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a syringe filled with hope. In liquid form, they weren't just rangers, they were keepers of second chances. Ever wonder what drives someone to risk it all for a creature that could kill them? Mile after mile, the jeep's engine growled, a determined heartbeat against the morning's hush. Themba spotted paw prints, faint and uneven, pressed into the earth like a fading signature. He slowed, pointing. They were close. CCO's breath caught as she imagined the lion's struggle, each step a plea for survival. Their empathy wasn't just duty, it was a fire that burned personal. You'd feel it too, wouldn't you, seeing a life hang by a thread and knowing you could change it? The tracks led to a clearing where the grass swayed like a whispered secret. Themba cut the engine, and silence rushed in, thick with anticipation. Somewhere nearby, A lion was fighting to breathe, and these two carried more than supplies, they carried compassion. It's like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what they'd find. CCO slung the kid over her shoulder, her heart racing. What shape would this king be in when they finally met? And then, a low groan, barely audible, drifted through the air. It was him. They exchanged a glance, time to move. What happens when you step toward a creature too weak to run but too wild to trust? The clearing shimmered under the morning sun, its light fracturing through a haze of pollen that danced like tiny sparks. Themba crouched low, his boots crunching on brittle twigs, the sound sharp against the savanna's soft hum. Kyo, a few steps behind, held a chunk of raw meat, its iron scent curling into the air, heavy and primal. There he was, the lion, sprawled beneath a fever tree, his sides heaving like bellows too worn to hold air. His eyes, dulled by hunger, locked onto them, and for a moment it felt like he was sizing up their souls. Ever meet someone, or something, that sees right through you? Themba's voice was a whisper, steady as a prayer, calling the lion's name. Not one they'd given him, but one that felt right, like Old King. The lion's ears twitched, a faint ripple of life, but he didn't move. CCO eased forward, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of this chance. She tossed the meat gently, letting it land a few feet away, its thud soft in the dirt. You know how sometimes you hold your breath, waiting for a sign that things might turn out okay? That's what this was. The lion's nose quivered, catching the meat's promise. Slowly, so slowly it hurt to watch, he dragged himself forward, each inch a battle against his own body. His tongue rasped over the chunk, tentative at first, then desperate, and Kichio's eyes welled up. It wasn't just food, it was trust, fragile as a spider's thread, weaving between them. Themba knelt, unpacking a syringe with antibiotics, his movements deliberate, like he was handling a sacred thing. Doesn't it make you wonder what trust really costs? A breeze stirred, carrying the faint sweetness of blooming wildflowers, a contrast to the lion's labored breaths. He didn't flinch when Themba edged closer, needle gleaming in the sunlight. The medicine went in smooth, and the lion let out a low rumble, not a growl, but something softer like gratitude. CCIO reached out, not touching, just letting her presence say, "We're here." It's wild how a moment can feel like a pact, isn't it? The lion ate a bit more, strength flickering in his frame. They sat there, the three of them, bound by something bigger than words, as the sun climbed higher. The lion's gaze softened, holding theirs, and it seemed like he knew help had come. But would he let them take the next step? Or was this as far as trust could stretch? The savanna exhaled a warm gust, stirring the fever tree's leaves into a soft rustle, like a lullaby for the weary. The lion, Old King, as Themba kept calling him, lay quieter now, the meat and medicine settling into his bones. Sikio stood, watch, her shadow falling gently over him, while Themba radioed for the transport cage. Its metal frame gleamed in the distance, hauled by a second jeep that crunched over the uneven ground. The air held a faint whiff of diesel, sharp against the earth's sun-baked warmth. Ever notice how the smallest things, like a cage, can feel like a turning point? Themba knelt beside Old King, his voice a low hum, telling stories of the park's rivers and stars, as if words could ease what came next. The lion's eyes followed him, not with fear, but with a stillness that seemed to say, "I'm listening." Zishio guided the cage closer, her steps careful like she was walking on glass. They didn't want force, never force. It's funny how you learn to move slow when trust is all you've got, isn't it? The cage door creaked open, its hinges singing a nervous note. Old King shifted, his paws scraping the dirt with a sound like whispered secrets. He sniffed the cage, its cold bars a stark contrast to the savanna's embrace. CCO scattered bits of meat inside, their scent curling like an invitation. He hesitated, one massive paw hovering, and Themba held his breath, feeling the weight of a life in that pause. You know those moments where time feels like it's holding its cards close? This was one, raw and real. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry years, Old King stepped in. No fight, no roar, just a peaceful surrender, like he knew this was his path. The door closed with a soft clang, and Kyo's hand lingered on the bars, her fingers trembling with relief. The Jeep's engine rumbled to life, vibrating through the ground, and the lion's gaze stayed steady, fixed on the horizon. Doesn't it hit you how some choices feel guided, like a quiet nod from the universe? As the Jeep rolled forward, dust swirling in its wake, Themba glanced back at Old King, curled in the cage. The savannah stretched endless around them, but this journey was headed somewhere new. What would it take to mend a body, and maybe a spirit so close to breaking? The Jeep pulled into the park's veterinary clinic as dusk settled, the sky a deep indigo streaked with fading gold. Old King's cage rattled softly, his shallow breaths blending with the hum of fluorescent lights flickering to life. The air inside the facility was cool, laced with the sharp sting of antiseptic, a far cry from the savannah's dusty warmth. Themba slid the cage door open, his hand steady but his heart racing, while Kitsio helped guide a stretcher closer. You ever feel like you're holding someone's whole world together just by showing up? Veterinarians swarmed, their voices a quiet chorus of urgency and care. Old King was lifted onto a steel table, his weight lighter than it should have been, his fur matted with stories of survival. A vet named Sarah pressed a stethoscope to his chest, her face tightening at the faint, uneven thump. His wounds, deep gashes from fights long past, oozed under the bright lights, and his teeth, worn to stubs, told of hunger's cruel toll. It's wild how a body can carry so much history, isn't it? They worked fast, cleaning cuts with a gentleness that felt like love. Antibiotics flowed through an IV, a lifeline dripping into Old King's veins. The room buzzed with the soft beep of monitors, each sound a tiny anchor to hope. CCO stood by, her fingers twisting the hem of her jacket, watching as painkillers eased the lion's trembling. Sarah muttered about malnutrition, her hands probing for signs of deeper damage, and found decay in his gums that made eating a battle. Ever wonder how much fight it takes to just keep going? Old King's eyes flickered, meeting CO's like he was saying, "I'm still here." The team wrapped his paws, raw from endless wandering, in bandages that smelled faintly of herbs. A feeding tube was set, delivering nutrients he hadn't known in months, and the lion's breathing steadied, a rhythm like waves finding shore. Themba leaned against the wall, whispering thanks to no one in particular. Maybe the universe. Maybe just the moment. It's those little victories that hit you hardest, right? But the vets exchanged glances. This was only the start of his healing. As night deepened outside, the clinic hummed with purpose. Old King rested, his chest rising, stronger now, but his journey wasn't over. Could they give him not just life, but peace? Morning light spilled through the clinic's windows, painting the concrete floor in warm patches that felt like a quiet blessing. Old King lay on a bed of straw, his fur cleaner now, catching glints of gold despite the scars. The air carried a faint musk of hay and medicine, softer than the antiseptic bite of the night before. Chio sat cross-legged nearby, humming a tune her grandmother used to sing, while Themba checked the feeding chart with a nod of relief. You ever notice how a new day can make everything seem possible? Old King's eyes, once clouded, held a spark, not the fire of his youth, but something gentler, like gratitude. He'd never roam the savannah again. His legs were too frail, his teeth too worn for the wild. Yet, as a vet adjusted his blanket, he nudged her hand with his nose. A slow, deliberate touch was the kind of moment that makes you think animals understand more than we give them credit for, right? The team had built him a sanctuary enclosure, a corner of Kruger with shade and space to rest. Peace wasn't freedom, but it was close. Days turned to weeks, and Old King grew steadier, his growls low and warm like a grandfather telling tales. The enclosure buzzed with life. Birds chirped in the nearby trees, their songs weaving through the rustle of leaves overhead. CCO brought him treats, Bits of soft meat she'd sneak past the vets, and Themba would laugh, saying she'd spoil their king. Their bond with him wasn't just care, it was family. The kind forged in quiet moments. Ever feel like love sneaks up when you're not looking? Visitors came sometimes, park staff or volunteers, standing at the fence to watch Old King bask in the sun. His presence taught them something. About survival, about compassion, about how even broken things can find purpose. One volunteer swore he felt lighter just sitting there, like the lion's calm was contagious. It's funny how the ones we save end up saving us, isn't it? Old King's days were slower now, but each one glowed with a dignity he'd earned. Evening fell, the sky blazing orange. Chio and Themba stood by his side, watching him doze. His breaths were even, his body at ease, and it seemed the universe had given him this, a final chapter written in love. What does it mean to truly live? If not to find a place where you're seen. And so, the Old King met his end. Not in the cold dust of the savannah, but in a little corner of peace, surrounded by those who saw beyond his scars. His story isn't just about a lion. It's about how compassion can change everything, how a gentle touch can reignite a spark nearly gone. You know, sometimes the greatest teachers have 4 paws, showing us that surviving is more than fighting. It's trusting. It's letting yourself be cared for. Themba and Chio, with their open hearts, remind us that helping an animal is also healing a piece of ourselves. Who hasn't looked into an animal's eyes and felt a lesson waiting there? The Old King's life ended with love, and that, my friend, is the truest miracle there is. And you, have you ever had a critter that changed your life? Tell us in the comments.